Good day all. My name is Edwin Greyling. I'm currently busy with my master's thesis at the University of Pretoria for environmental management. The point of this presentation is to introduce my thesis topic. I hope you guys enjoy. My thesis topic is a comparative study, estuarine water quality monitoring in the Olifants and Breda estuaries. Let me begin by giving a bit of brief background to the estuarine water quality monitoring background in South Africa. In 1998, the National Water Act, Act number 36 of 1998, mandated that the Department of Water and Sanitation undertake monitoring practices for water resources for the protection of the natural environment. 10 years later, the Integrated Coastal Management Act was released. This was Act number 24 of 2008, which stated that estuarine water quality monitoring is an integral component of estuarine management plans, which are a requirement of the previously mentioned Act. With no further ado, let's get into the introduction to my mini-thesis. This will be a comparative study which will be based on two estuaries, namely the Olifants and the Breda. Both the Olifants and the Breda estuary fall within the top 20 South African priority estuaries for monitoring, based on an objective model and the subjective outcomes of a monitoring workshop held in 2008, where the Olifants estuary is ranked at 7 and the Breda estuary is ranked at 18th. What should be noted here is that comparative studies of high important estuaries could give insight into changing trends which will aid future integrated water resource management practices. This comparative study will be based on hydrological years data collected every 2 hours with the use of permanently deployed probes in both the Breda and the Olifants estuary. Data will span from hydrological year 2012-2013 to hydrological year 2020 to 2021. A hydrological year usually spans from the months of October to September of the subsequent year. Let's discuss the Integrated Water Resource Management framework. IWRM sets out to achieve effective monitoring of water resources whilst ensuring the sustainability and longevity of water resources. The IWRM approach also sees each water resource as a different system which needs site-specific management evaluation based on available resources and research outcomes. What should be noticed with regard to the IWRM approach is that there are many integral parts for each system. Many a times, flow diagrams such as the one included on the slide are incorporated in order to visualize what each system requires. This flow diagram was taken from a estuary study. I know that a lot of the components can't be read currently and it's quite blurred, but what should be noted here are the 5 side inputs, mainly the monitoring program, integrated database, estuarine health comparison, integrated estuarine management, as well as the indices development. These 5 approaches will all be combined and interstudied in order to produce effective outcomes with regard to the integrated water resource management approach for different water systems. A little bit of brief background on the Olifants estuary. The Olifants estuary is located 250 kilometers north of Cape Town on the west coast of South Africa. The Olifants estuary is the 12th largest estuary in the country, covering a total area of 702 hectares and is of great importance in terms of its conservation value. It is also one of the least developed, permanently open estuaries in the country. However, development along the west coast could degrade estuarine water conditions, leading to numerous ecological knock-on effects. There are, however, luckily many conservation strategies and management plans, such as the Olifants Estuary Management Plan, in place in order to uphold the integrity of estuarine health and water quality. Then again, let's give a brief background into the Breda Estuary. The Breda Estuary enters the Indian Ocean at Sebastian Bay along the Garden Route, roughly 280 kilometers from Cape Town, but in the opposite direction, while along the opposite coast. The Breda Estuary was actually one of the first estuaries in the country for which an estuarine management plan was compiled. This was part of a pilot study under the Cape Estuaries Management Program. The present ecological condition of the Breda estuary is classified as good, as it is associated with the status category B, which means largely natural with only a few modifications. However, upstream agricultural return flows, as well as the release of wastewater effluent and high levels of boating activity in the Breda river system negatively influence water quality and therefore biodiversity further downstream in the estuary. The Breda River Estuary Management Plan is, however, in place in order to uphold the integrity of estuarine health and water quality. I am now going to discuss the methodology that I will be using in order to fulfill my thesis. Data from both the Breda and Olifants estuaries will be downloaded from the National Estuarine Monitoring Program of the DWS, Department of Water and Sanitation. This data will include temperature data, water level data, salinity data, and flow data. The data will be compared based on 1, the typical high flow, low flow seasons for separate hydrological years, as well as the low flow, high flow conditions based on actual station data. Data from both sides will then be compared using flow versus typical hydrological dry and wet cycles as defined by the hydrological year. All data processing will occur in Microsoft Excel, where a database will be established. Deductions on trends and comparisons will then be drawn based on figures and tables created within the mentioned database. Let me give you a brief example of how data will be processed. For example, within the first hydrological year, let's look at temperature within the Olifants database. The Olifants database has wet season data, which spans from April to September, as well as dry season data, which spans from October to March. A1 would be the temperature during the wet season, where A2 would be the temperature during the dry season. The Olifants database also then has actual high flow, which would be, while the temperature would be B1, and the temperature at B2 would be the actual low flow data. What is important to note here is that we would be comparing A1 to B1 to find any comparisons. Once again, we will then repeat this process for salinity as well as for the whole Breda estuary. We will then compare, per se, A1 of Olifants with B1 of Breda in order to gain an understanding of how the inverse systems interact. This will then be repeated for each hydrological year from 2012 to 2020. The hypothesis states that there is no difference between the data, being temperature and salinity, when comparing the actual flow data and the typical high flow season in each hydrological year. In order to conclude, let's consider the following points. The comparison between high importance estuaries can give valuable insight in how to manage water resources, not only by looking for differences and discrepancies in data, but also by looking for common trends that occur. Adaptive approaches can then be taken to unique estuarine environments based on available resources for the development and update of water management plans in an effort to curb changing global temperatures. Databases such as the one that I will set up will also aid in the understanding of functioning of estuarine environments and therefore aid towards the conservation of such systems. There's a brief list of my references. Thank you very much. Any questions that you have may be addressed directly to my Tux Gmail account. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I appreciate it.